It is the question that it wakes you up at 3 in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, probably spinning on high because, well, let's face it, it's Louisiana, and you're wondering, is now the right time to sell?
It feels like everyone is asking it.
Everyone. You turn on the national news, and they are screaming about interest rates, housing crashes, or inventory shortages. And, I mean, it is enough to make your head spin.
It is completely overwhelming. And, the biggest issue we find in the research is that those national headlines, they're often completely irrelevant to your actual reality.
Right.
Real estate isn't one big national blog. It is hyperlocal. What is happening in Phoenix or downtown Manhattan has very little to do with what is happening in a subdivision off Highland Road.
That is the friction point, isn't it?
Yeah.
We consume national media, but we live local lives.
Exactly.
And that is why we are going on a very specific mission today. We are decoding the real estate market, but we are stripping away all that national noise to do a deep dive into the Greater Baton Rouge market specifically. We have a stack of notes here based on an in-depth interview with a local expert, someone who is literally on the ground every single day in the red stick.
And what I love about this source material is that it moves beyond the spreadsheets. We aren't just looking at interest rate charts. We are looking at life triggers, specific neighborhood quirks, and the very unique rhythm of Louisiana real estate.
So if you are holding the keys to a house in Baton Rouge or Central or Denham Springs, and you're wondering if you should put a sign in the yard, stay with us. We are going to answer the question, when is the right time to sell?
Spoiler alert, the answer might not be what you expect. It usually has a lot less to do with the Federal Reserve Chairman and a lot more to do with your own guest bedroom.
Okay, let's unpack that. The source material starts with what I'm calling the golden rule of selling.
Right.
That's a pretty bold claim. The expert basically says, look, stop obsessing over the market data.
This is the core conflict we see in the analysis. Market timing versus life timing. The expert was very, very clear that the perfect market, that magical moment where rates are zero and buyers are just throwing cash at you, that's a myth.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't. I've seen data on people who wait 2, even 3 years for the market to be just right, and they end up missing the actual opportunity because they were just paralyzed by the charts. The takeaway here is that your life dictates the timeline. The market just provides the context for how we execute that timeline.
I like that distinction. Life is the driver. The market is just the weather. But in Baton Rouge, life looks a little different than it does in other parts of the country.
Oh, for sure.
The source highlights some very specific triggers that drive people to sell here. The big one seems to be employment, but it's specific to our local industry.
You can't talk about Baton Rouge real estate without talking about the petrochemical industry. It's the engine.
Right. ExxonMobil, Dow.
Exactly. We are anchored by major global players, ExxonMobil, Dow, BASF, and that whole refinery corridor along the river. The expert points out that for many families, the decision to sell isn't really a choice, it's a transfer order.
That brings a different level of urgency, doesn't it?
A huge level.
When a transfer comes through, you can't exactly sit around waiting for the spring selling season.
You have to go. That corporate relocation factor is a huge driver of inventory in our market.
Yeah.
It keeps the gears turning even when the broader economy, slows down.
Okay, so that's one. What's next?
But it's not just people leaving the state. A massive chunk of the market is the move-up buyer.
Walk me through that profile. What does the move-up look like in this specific geography?
So it's a really consistent pattern. You have first-time buyers who entered the market in more affordable entry-level areas.
Okay.
The source mentions neighborhoods like Gardere, Sherwood Forest, or parts of Gonzales. They bought there because that's what the budget allowed 5 or 6 years ago.
Which is smart. You get your foot in the door, you stop paying rent.
Precisely. But now life has happened. They've got 2 kids, a dog, and suddenly that 3-bedroom, 1-bath setup feels claustrophobic.
Although tight.
Yeah. Their priorities have shifted from low mortgage payment to specific school district. So they are selling in those starter neighborhoods to move to places like Prairieville, Central, or Zachary.
It's the circle of life, essentially. You outgrow the starter home.
And on the flip side of that coin, you have the empty nesters. The source got really specific here, mentioning established neighborhoods like Jefferson Place, University Club, or the Garden District.
Oh, yeah, I can picture those houses. Beautiful, but a lot of maintenance.
A ton of maintenance. The kids are gone, the tuition is finally paid, and suddenly, maintaining a 3,500 square foot house and a pool feels like a burden, not a luxury.
They want something easier.
They are looking to downsize maybe to a townhome or a patio home.
So what does this all mean for the listener? It sounds like you're saying if you were waiting for an economist on TV to give you the green light, you're doing it wrong.
That is the message. If you need a better school district for your 6-year-old, or if your niece can't handle the stairs in your garden district home anymore, that is your signal.
That's the trigger.
Urgency is the catalyst. Market conditions are just the waters we have to navigate once the decision is made.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate. Even if my life trigger is pulled, the math still has to work.
Of course.
I can't move if I'm underwater. This brings us to a concept the source calls the equity cushion.
This is the good news part of the deep dive. If you bought a house in Baton Rouge before, say, 2021, you are likely sitting on a lot more cash than you realize.
Really?
Yes. We often hear about how crazy the market was during the pandemic, but the long-term effect is that homeowners have built up significant equity.
Does that apply everywhere? Or just the hot neighborhoods?
That's the interesting part. Even in areas that aren't necessarily flashy or in the news, the source specifically mentioned Denham Springs, Watson, and parts of Central, there have been strong, steady gains over the last 5 or 6 years.
So that equity isn't just a number on a piece of paper, that's your leverage.
It's the funding for your next move.
Yeah.
That's your down payment, your closing costs, or maybe just cash to renovate the new place. But, and here's where it gets tricky. How do you know how much equity you actually have?
My instinct, and I assume everyone's instinct,
Yeah.
is to open an app.
Open Zillow.
Exactly.
Ah.
Look at this estimate and assume that's the price.
And according to our expert, that would be a significant mistake.
Oh.
This raises a really important concept, the Zillow problem.
Why is it a problem? Is the algorithm broken?
It's not that it's broken, it's that it's blind to geography. Baton Rouge is a patchwork. It is not a perfect grid of identical houses like you might find in some planned suburbs in the Midwest.
Right.
The expert used a great example. You could have a home in Shenandoah worth $350,000. Literally a mile away, in a different subdivision, a similar-sized home is worth $220,000.
A mile away. That's a massive swing.
Massive. And an algorithm sitting on a server in Silicon Valley doesn't understand those micro-market nuances. It doesn't know that one street floods during heavy rain and the other doesn't.
It doesn't know about the new HOA rules or the roads.
No, it doesn't know that one subdivision just repaved its roads and has a booming HOA while the one next door is declining.
It lacks the context. It just sees 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 708 something zip code.
Exactly. So if you rely on that number, you are either going to overprice your home and sit on the market forever or underprice it and leave money on the table.
So if we can't trust the robots, what is the alternative?
You need a human. Specifically, the source emphasizes getting a CMA, a comparative market analysis.
Let's define that, because CMA gets thrown around a lot in real estate. What is it actually?
Think of it as a forensic report on value. It's created by a local agent. Instead of guessing, they pull actual sold data. Not list prices, but what homes actually sold for from the last 3 to 6 months.
Okay, the real numbers.
The real numbers. And crucially, they match the subdivision, the square footage, and the level of updates. It's an apples-to-apples comparison.
The source actually recommends getting a CMA once a year, even if you have zero intention of selling. That seemed interesting to me.
I think that is brilliant advice. We check our 401k balances constantly, right?
All the time.
We track our stocks. Your home is likely your biggest financial asset. You should know its performance.
That's a great point.
The expert mentioned a story about a homeowner in Mid-City who thought their place was worth $200,000 based on old data. Turns out, after running the real numbers, it was closer to $270,000 because that specific area had appreciated so fast.
That's life-changing money. That changes the whole can we afford to move conversation.
It opens doors you didn't know were there. But it works both ways. Sometimes the CMA reveals you don't have enough equity yet, especially if you bought recently in a new subdivision where appreciation is slower.
So it's a reality check.
Knowing the hard truth prevents you from making a bad financial move.
Okay, so we know we need a CMA because Baton Rouge is complex. I want to dig into that complexity. The source was really emphatic that there is no such thing as the Baton Rouge market.
It's a myth. It just is. Baton Rouge is one city, but it's dozens of independent markets. This is critical for our listeners to understand. What is happening in South Downs is completely different from what is happening off Airline Highway.
Can you give us some examples of these micromarkets? What did the source identify as the current hotspots?
Well, Mid-City is the standout story of the last decade. It's a classic revitalization narrative.
Oh, yeah.
You've got the Government Street Corridor, the Road Diet, White Star Market. The whole vibe has changed. Because the walkability and culture improved, the prices followed.
I've seen it firsthand.
Homes that were $150,000 5 years ago are now selling for $250,000 or $300,000.
I love seeing that area come back to life. It has such character, but for a long time, the values were just stagnant.
Right. And then you have the growth driven by schools in space. Central and Zachary are consistently strong markets. Why? Because people prioritize those independent school districts.
The schools are a huge draw.
They really are. Inventory stays tight there because once people get in, they tend to stay until the kids graduate.
And what about outside the city limits?
Look at Prairieville and Dutchtown. They have seen consistent growth because, frankly, they offer more affordability compared to some parts of East Baton Rouge, but you still get newer construction.
Got it.
And then there's Denham Springs. The source called it a value play.
A value play. What does that mean?
It means it has appreciated more than people expected. You get a lot of house for the money in Denham, and buyers are responding to that, especially as prices in Baton Rouge proper creep up.
So if I'm listening to this and I live in one of these areas, how do I know if the market is actually good right now? Aside from price, what are the indicators?
There are 4 metrics the expert watches, and you should too. First, inventory. Are there 50 houses for sale in your neighborhood or two? Low inventory is good for sellers. It means less competition.
Simple supply and demand.
Exactly. Second, days on market. In desirable areas like the ones we just mentioned, homes are going under contract in 2 to 4 weeks.
That's fast. If you see a sign up for 3 months, that tells you something is wrong.
Exactly. Third is the sale-to-list ratio. Are homes selling for what they are asking, or are they getting negotiated down?
Okay.
In East Baton Rouge, we are seeing homes land very close to list price right now. And finally, and this is the one we can't ignore, interest rates.
I feel like we can't do a real estate deep dive without saying the words interest rates.
Yeah.
It's the elephant in the room.
It is. But here's the nuance the source provided. It's not just about the rate being low or high, it's about the shift.
What do you mean?
The expert noted that even a quarter-point drop in rates triggers immediate buyer activity. You can feel it. So if rates dip slightly, that's a signal that more buyers are about to enter the pool.
Okay, so we've got the where and the how much. Now let's talk about the when. Because anyone who lives in Louisiana knows that our calendar is unique.
That's a good way to put it.
We have seasons that the rest of the country doesn't have, like crawfish season and, unfortunately, hurricane season.
And that impacts real estate heavily. You cannot sell a house in Baton Rouge the same way you sell one in Chicago. The source lays out a very specific Louisiana calendar for selling.
So when is the absolute sweet spot?
March through June. That is the prime window. Families want to get settled before the school year starts. The weather is usually decent warm, but not lethal, and gardens look good. Everything is blooming.
Makes sense. But then August hits.
The summer slump. This is a very real thing in Baton Rouge. The heat and humidity are oppressive. We're talking 90% humidity. The expert put it perfectly. Nobody wants to house hunt in 100 degrees.
It's miserable.
Oh.
You walk out to check the mail and you need a shower. I can't imagine touring 5 houses in that, getting in and out of a hot car.
It creates friction. Showing activity just drops because physically people don't want to be outside. And then you have the hurricane factor.
This is a big psychological hurdle, isn't it?
Huge. From June through November, the threat is there. But specifically, the memory of the 2016 floods looms large in this market.
Still?
Oh, yeah. In the fall, during the peak of storm season, buyers start hesitating. They're thinking about flood zones, rising insurance costs, storm prep. It adds a layer of anxiety to the transaction.
You see a dark cloud and you think, maybe I shouldn't buy a house right now.
Exactly. However, the expert did add a very important caveat.
What was that?
Good homes, priced right, sell anytime, even December 23rd. So seasonality matters, but it's not a death sentence. If you have to sell in August, you can. You just need to price it correctly.
Okay, so we've talked about when to sell, but I want to flip the script. When should you not sell? The source had a do not sell list, and frankly, it scared me a little.
It should. This is about avoiding financial disaster. The first red flag is the no plan seller. Do not list your house if you don't know where you're going. Inventory is tight. You could sell your house in a week and then find yourself homeless because you can't find a new place to buy.
Panic buying is never a good look. You end up in a house you hate just because you needed a roof.
Never a good idea. The second red flag is the quick flip. If you've owned your home for less than a year, be very, very careful.
Why? Is it capital gains taxes?
It's actually just the raw transaction costs. People forget this. Between agent commissions, closing costs, title insurance, and moving expenses, it costs roughly 8% to 10% of the sale price just to sell the house.
Ouch. So let's do the math. On a $300,000 house, that is $30,000 just disappearing at the closing table.
Gone. So if your house hasn't gone up in value by at least 10% since you bought it, you are writing a check to sell your house. You are losing money.
Wow.
Unless you absolutely have to move for a job or a crisis, you need to stay long enough for appreciation to cover those costs.
That is a sobering reality check. What's the third red flag?
The emotional pricer. This is a person who says, my house is special because I lived in it. I raised my kids here.
Or, my neighbor sold for $320,000, so mine must be worth $340,000, even though the neighbor had a brand new kitchen and you have Formica from 1995.
Exactly that. If the comps, the data, don't support your price, you are just going to sit on the market. The market speaks truth. You have to separate your ego from the asset.
That is tough to do, but essential. Okay, so let's say our listener has crunched the numbers, they have a life trigger, and they avoided the red flags. They're thinking, maybe I am ready. What is the first step?
The source advises starting with a no-pressure conversation. Don't call an agent and say, come list my house. That feels too final.
Right.
Call them and say, I want to run the numbers.
That takes the pressure off. You aren't signing a contract, you're just gathering data.
Exactly. But if you aren't quite ready for that phone call yet, there are some DIY things you can do to arm yourself with information. The expert suggests the buyer's walk.
Is that where you walk through your own house and criticize everything?
Basically, you have to take off your homeowner glasses, the ones that ignore the pile of mail or the scuff marks on the baseboards, and put on your buyer glasses.
I see.
Look at the curb appeal. Look at the caulking in the shower. What would make a stranger hesitate to write a check?
It's about seeing your home as a product, not a sanctuary.
And then do your own market research. Be a neighborhood stalker.
Yeah.
When a for sale sign goes up down the street, write down the asking price. Watch how long it takes to go pending. And then, this is the pro tip, go to the assessor's website or a site that shows sold data like realtor.com after it closes.
Why wait until it closes?
Because the asking price is a wish. The sold price is the reality. The assessor's site tells you what someone actually paid.
That is where the real truth lives.
It is. If you do that for 3 or 4 houses in your neighborhood over a few months, you will know more about your specific micromarket than 90% of the population.
You'll have a baseline.
You'll have a baseline before you ever talk to an agent.
I love that. It's empowering. You aren't guessing, you're researching.
And that brings us back to the core message of this entire deep dive. Successful selling in Baton Rouge, or really anywhere, is about data over emotion.
It really is. It's about knowing your subdivision stats rather than panicking over national headlines. It's about understanding that the perfect time is a myth.
That's the final provocative thought I want to leave with the listener. The source said something profound. Waiting for perfection is the enemy of a good decision.
That hits home. Waiting for perfection is the enemy of a good decision.
Think about it. If you are holding on to a property because you're waiting for rates to hit a magical low number again, or for your equity to hit a specific peak, you might be waiting forever. Meanwhile, life is passing you by. You're staying in a house that doesn't fit your family, waiting for a market condition that might never exist.
So the question is, are you holding back because the time isn't perfect, or simply because you haven't looked at the real numbers yet?
That's the question everyone needs to answer for themselves.
If you're nodding along, maybe it's time to do your homework. Go get that annual checkup. Get a CMA. Look at the real data for your street.
Knowledge is the antidote to anxiety. Once you know the numbers, the decision usually makes itself.
Well said. That's all we have for this deep dive into the Baton Rouge market. Hopefully we've helped you decode the signs a little bit better.
Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you on the next one.